Good morning. Dobry din from the Kilted Scotsman. Just this is a follow up from one of my first posts I made here on Scottish food. Well, this is a follow up. This is on Russian food. So I want to go through the history of some of the Russian food and what the Russians tend to eat while they're there. Well, where do we start? Most important food probably to all Russians is bread. Bread. The history of bread is so important to Russians because we have to remember that during the Second World War, the Russian population in Leningrad were subjected to a closure of all space. The Germans closed them off, and the idea was they weren't going to get together and fight against the Russians and the Germans. The idea was that they were going to starve the population. Now, the population at the time, I think, was about 3 million, something along that lines. And so they closed up all the areas that anybody could get out. And the idea was that they would starve them. So during that time, obviously they went through, I think it lasted for about 2 years. They went through really horrendous deprivation, as there was no heat, there was no food, and people were dying in the streets. They couldn't bury anybody. It was horrendous. I mean, over 1 million people died during that period of time. Now, what they were trying to do was to trying to get as many survive as it was possibility. And so one of the most important items then was bread. So each person was allowed a small piece of bread every day. And that was supposed to keep them surviving through that time. That's why bread in Russian culture, one of the absolute sacrileges is to throw away bread. My mother-in-law taught me that very quickly. I thought, why are you putting a slice of bread into the fridge or a part of bread? And she said, and she explained the situation of what happened during the Second World War. And it makes sense. That small piece of bread, and it was a rye bread, it was the reality of, at the end of the time, that what was in that bread was like sawdust and all sorts of things to try and bulk it out. But it managed to make people survive. That's why now bread is so important to Russian people, and that you have to make sure never ever throw away bread. Okay, now that we've touched on bread and how important it is, we'll step on to, as we did when we did the Scottish one, we start from breakfast and we'll work way down. So, what do we start with in Russian? What do they have? They are very conscious of milk products, and everyone definitely uses milk products in the mornings. We have one thing called kefir, which is basically a fermented milk. My family and most of the Russians that I know all like kefir and use kefir constantly. Me, I've tried it, don't like it. I will try it again, but it's just not for me. The other thing that they use is tворог. Tворог is basically a cottage cheese. This one in particular is just with sweet, so it's sweetened with fruit. But basically, normally it's cut down in a little block that they have for breakfast, and it's tворог, and that is basically a cottage cheese. Now, they also follow up, they have other milk products, things like tan, which again, something I don't like. I like milk. I love milk, and they use milk, and they make things like pancakes, and they also use kefir for pancakes, and that's another thing they do with it. They also love their omelets, eggs, omelets. So we have either full-on omelets, or they used to do fried eggs. And when I was in Kazakhstan, and I worked in Kazakhstan, they used to put mayonnaise along with these fried eggs for breakfast. Kefir. No Russian house would have no kefir in the house. Tворог. Everybody has tворог for breakfast. Blinsky. Now they can be filled with meat, caviar, fish, all sorts of things, cheese, stuff like this. Quite normal for a breakfast in Russia. Also, they have kasha, which is very, very like of Scottish porridge, but they tend to make it sweet. They tend to make it with jam or honey or that sort of thing. And then they have another thing that they use for breakfast time, buckwheat, greshka, which again is something I don't particularly like, but they can also use greshka at main meal as an accompaniment for a meal, a meat dish. So then I also, what I tend to have more in Moscow is like a continental breakfast with some bit of bread, cheese, and ham or some sort of cold meat. And the last part of their breakfast time is like fruit juices. They particularly like tomato juice, apple juice, and orange juice. And then they move into teas. Now, we always thought that British are pretty notorious for tea drinkers. Well, I would say the Russians are just as bad on their types of teas. The difference is they have some strange and wonderful flavored. My wife comes up quite often with some strange, different flavors for tea. The mother-in-law loves nettle tea. Not my thing at all. I don't like tea, I don't drink tea or coffee, so it's not my thing. And they also like plenty coffee. So if you ever go to a Russian supermarket, you might see a very, very small area where they might have things like, chips or crisps. Not very much you'll see in a supermarket. But if you go to a supermarket in Russia, you can guarantee you have shelves full of different flavored teas and different flavored coffees. That is the Russian way. Okay, now we're sort of moving on to lunchtime. One of the things that Russians like is their soups. So we'll touch on 2 or 3 soups here. One of the most that's important one and what's the most well known is our borscht soup, which is basically a beetroot soup. I've been learning how to make that for many years now. It's a soup I particularly like. I've made it with Russians, and the likes of my family love my borscht, which I'm very, very happy about because it's a good soup. It's a good soup, and it can be used in very various ways, uh, as with meat in it, or it has beans, cabbage, beetroot, tomato based, different things. But I particularly like my own way, which is our beetroot with carrot, onions, red beans, uh, and then the flavourings into it. The most important part, as I've always found, is when you're cooking it, you fry off your onions and your carrots and your beetroot, and it brings the flavour out more than just putting it into water and boiling it up. So it gives it more flavour. So I prefer to do it that way, and it works better. The second soup that we're looking at is a kroshka. A kroshka basically is a cold soup, and they use a lot through the summery time. In Russia, they use it. There's actually two types of it. One is done with kvass, which is basically a fermented uh, bread liquid, or with kefir, and then you can actually put beetroot into it to give it the different colour and the taste of beetroot into it. But the normal way, and the way that most people use it, is with potatoes, boiled eggs, radishes, cucumber, and plenty of herbs. So when it's all put together, this is where all your flavours are. This is all, and it's all pushed into together. One, as I said, again, my mother-in-law uses it a lot during the summer times. Third soup is a solyanka. Solyanka soup, which is basically a barley soup with bacon and various types of meat, potatoes and herbs. Now, the best way to do that is when you're cooking your barley, put all the flavours into there. So you're keeping the flavours from the cooking liquor of the barley being cooked. So when you put your ham and all that sort of thing to it, it adds more flavour to it. But soups are very well used for a lunchtime in Russia. Okroshka, traditional kefir or kvass cold soup made with herbs and eggs and potatoes, cucumbers, radishes. Borscht soup. Solyanka soup. Lunches ourselves normally is pretty quick. Things like cutlets or galupsi. Galupsi is stuffed cabbage, basically stuffed with some minced meat and rice flavourings, and it's all wrapped up and it's cooked into like a tomato sauce. Very nice, something I do enjoy. Enjoy the fried fish and stuff like that. And then when you're actually having lunch, it's pretty normal to the people that have cucumbers or tomatoes to go as a complement with their lunch meal. What they do normally to do when they're doing their lunchtime is they'll start with a salad. So the salad will be there with your hot meal. So your things like your normal Caesars, you have your Russian salad. The Russian salad is known throughout the world. Olivier salad. It consists of boiled potatoes, carrots, knocked into a small cube, small pieces of meat, peas, chopped pickled cucumbers, chopped onions, bananas, apples, and they're banded together with mayonnaise. Then you can move on to things like shuba salad, or what it's known as the fur coat salad. Now that's basically a layered salad with herring. It has potatoes, it's carrots, it's onions, it has beetroot. And the dressing normally is done with either mayonnaise or sour cream, smetana, and it's mixed up there and it's put down and it's put into layers, and it's a nice salad. But shuba in Russian actually means fur coat, so basically that's what it is, fur coat salad. One of the other things my mother-in-law loves is her beetroot salad. It's beetroots with it has garlic, it has walnut, it has prunes, and sour cream, and the dressing. This is one of the ones that she uses when it comes things like parties in the family parties or New Year or stuff like this. It's one of my mother-in-law's favourites. We have another thing called holidays, holodods, which is basically the same as potted meats and jelly for Scottish. Not my favourite, but a lot of people use this during that time. One thing, as I said, on all meals like this, they will always have tomatoes, they'll always have cucumbers. If they've got a meal like a family get together, you'll have sliced meats then up there, you'll have sliced salmon, and you have things like this along on the tables so that everything looks nice and tidy. You also have things like herring cut down in small pieces. That's very, very well liked in Russia. And special occasions, they have caviar. Now, we have caviar quite a lot. Now, it's always amazed me that to us, caviar is like something that is so expensive that we would never ever buy. But they have fish eggs, and which basically is caviar, that they sell in Russia, and some of it is okay. It's good. It's not too expensive, but very, very enjoyable. We also have things like scumbria, which is basically a type of mackerel, and it's cut down, and people eat it. They eat that. It's scumbria, which is basically, as I said, a mackerel. Then you also have something else that I never touch, but Russians like, is sala, which basically is slices of fat, but very well liked. People put it on brown bread, and they eat it off of brown bread. As I say, something I do not like. I know my son loves it, so it's something that we'll use quite often. And they also have stuff like what they call vegetable caviar, ikra, which basically is things like aubergines or various vegetables, all mashed up, mixed up, and it's nice when you put it on top of bread or you take it as a part of a salad. It's nice, very tasty. And And then the last thing they'll have is pierogi, which basically are filled buns filled with cheese or filled with one of the favourite ones there was potatoes or cabbage, mushrooms, meat itself, chicken. So basically, they're filled buns. If then we're going into meats, another ones of meats that we can use, these are for main meals more than day shift. So you would have like beef stroganoff. Beef stroganoff, it is said that this was his first dish that was served in the Romanov family, which is the royal family in Russia before they were killed. Basically, it's fillet beef with onions, mushrooms, garlic, and cream. Very well liked. I know where I've worked in most places, stroganoff is very much liked. Now, most of the other places, the barbecues are very, very important. So you have your shashliks, and you basically is kebab type meat that are cooked over in the barbecue, and they're obviously their steaks and their chickens and all these sort of chicken dishes. Um, they're well liked. They like a lot of fried fish, full fish, and again that can go in the barbecue and bream and stuff like that. And they'll go to the supermarket and they'll actually pick their own fish straight off the tanks. This is quite common in Russia.
One of the other main meals or lunchtime meals, which is very, very popular in Russia, is pelmeni. It's basically like a ravioli pastry. It's a pasta paste that you fill into small shapes, and then they're put into water and boiled up. And one of my favourites, to be perfectly honest, once a week we try and have, me and my son, we have pelmeni. And of course there's lots and lots of different flavours can put in there. And then they do have the sweet versions of like vareniki, which basically is like with the jam type of or compote of fruit into there. Very much enjoyed in Russia, and we can't forget pelmeni. Traditional Russian salad, Olivier salad. Beetroot salad with egg and potato and mackerel and carrot. Salad with mackerel, rice and caviar. Beetroot salad. Holidays. Basically meat and jelly. Potted meat. Salo. Basically fat. Served normally in brown bread, and it can be served also with vodka. Pierogi. Various types. Shashlik. Various flavors, beef, chicken. Pelmeni.
So now we're moving on to sweets. Now sweets, Russians do have a sweet tooth. That's a fact. They have a lot of things that they call safia, which basically is a mallow type meringue, and it's put with lots of different flavors and lots of different colors, and it's used everywhere. And a lot of it's chocolatey and whatever, all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty much standard people use. There is sirloki, which basically a tворог that's put into a small log covered in chocolate. And as I say, that can be breakfast or as a snack. They like their crepes, and they like their crepes full with fruit or chocolate sauce or like much. They also like waffles. They'll do the same. Then we have things like Napoleon cake, which is very much like a mille-feuille, and it's very similar to a Medovic, which is a honey cake. Now, this honey cake, seemingly the Tsar's wife really loved this cake, loved it, but she hated honey, which is strange. But she made sure that every meal when they did things like this, that they had this Medovic cake up there and the Napoleon cake, this sort of thing. Now, we visited a place called Tula, and Tula is very well known for its gingerbread. So it's Priyanka, which is very, very. It has a little ice and sugar at the top of it. It's like, and then you taste into it, and you can taste the ginger, and it's very well known from the area from Tula.
Zifia, basically sweet, soft mallow, various flavours. Traditional Russian sweet cake. Blinski or crepes. Kompot, a refreshing drink made with fruit.
If we're coming into drinks, as I said, the Russians love their tea. So you get a lot of tea when you come to restaurants and stuff like that. But they also like compote. Compote basically is a cold fruit, pressed fruit, and you see everywhere you go, you have this compote, and this is very typical of Russia for a cold. Then, of course, what would we go if we weren't thinking about vodka? Part of Russia is vodka. Now, I have tried many types of vodka through the years, and there is only two or three that I particularly like. The Russian Standard, which is very good, Stolichnaya, and you have various different types from gold to black to, and Stolichnaya is very, very good vodka, but it's more expensive. But I found one that is very cheap, and my father-in-law came up with it a long time ago. It's called Parliament. Parliament is a very reasonable priced vodka, and I keep one in my freezer every day in case we have people come over. Now, the thing with vodka, if you're drinking it proper in Russia, you do not mix it. It's not what they call, they look at as a mixer. That we would have vodka, coke, and things like that. We wouldn't do that. They don't do that in Russia. You do small glasses, and it's dropped straight down. Now, most Russians will have in the freezer a couple of glasses and their vodka in the freezer. So when it comes out, it goes straight. So it has that crispness from the vodka, and when it goes, it is massively, massively better straight from the cup, from the freezer. There's also a lot of good wines, a lot of Georgian wines that they bring in, and a lot of champagnes. And again, one thing you can almost guarantee in Russia is that there will be a bottle of wine or a bottle of champagne in the house, just in case the celebration or something happens. Then they'll always have something there to do it. It's pretty standard from there. Other things that I did notice with Russians, they love things like pumpkin seeds and sesame seeds, and they put them in and they bite and they take and you get the black pieces all over the place. Now, a lot of the guys from the stands, in Turkestan or Uzbekistan, etc., that come up as a migrant workers in Moscow, they use a lot of that, and you see them a lot where they've been in the parks or something. They'll sit and eat all these seeds away. One thing that I would say right at the end of it is basically Russians' diet is actually quite healthy. They do have a lot of fresh fruit. They have what they call Renox, which is basically a market, and the market's everywhere. And the vegetables and the fruit and everything is it's a good price, good quality, great quality, in fact. But the various types of things like your berries and that only used through a certain time of the year. And tomatoes can go very expensive at certain parts of the year and cheap when it comes to the summertime. So you have to be able to know how much this fruit and vegetable can cost. But again, through the years, you get used to that sort of thing. And of course, the other thing is one thing we've noticed. They still use a lot of the fast food chains that the Western world used to use. A lot of them have changed their names, but they basically got the same products inside it, which is like your McDonald's and your KFCs and things like that. They've changed the name, but the same products. Same with Starbucks. It's basically now Star Coffee or something like that. So they just changed the name. It's the same thing. Some chains did not change their name, which is a good thing because basically they've kept their name, and that's right. It's great. And then we have an awful lot of sushi places round about. Sushi is very, very well liked through Russia. So food wise, I enjoy the fact that when I do travel in Russia, I mean Russia is so vast, so massive. You're talking about 11 time zones between the west through to the east, and the food in various areas is obviously different. So when I do visit some of these places, to taste the food is always one of my favourite parts of Moscow. So I hope that you enjoyed the little mix that we've done from some of the Russian food against the English, British, and Scottish food. Um, I hope you enjoyed my little take. And if you did, please like and subscribe so that I can build the channel a bit more, so that we can actually do live cooking on my stoves, or we can do tastings here, things like that, so that we can get more information on what it's like to actually live here in Russia. That's why I do a lot of these visit videos where I visit some places through Russia. I am not paid to do that sort of thing. I just show you what I see. And the place round, especially in Moscow, there is so much to see that is beautiful. Don't believe that it's all bad. It isn't. Russia is a beautiful place to live with. Yes, we know there's the things that happen at the moment, and that's not ideal. But please don't think everything Russian is bad, because it isn't. And do take that from a Scotsman who lives here. Have a good day. Och, I the new.